Officer tased a veteran, holding his service dog. 5 minutes later, the Marines showed up. At exactly 2:15 p.m. on a sunny Thursday in a quiet Virginia suburb, something happened that no one in the neighborhood would ever forget. 70-year-old retired gunnery sergeant Walt Briggs, a decorated U.S. Marine veteran, was simply trying to enter the medical building for his regular physical therapy appointment. At his side was Boone, his black Labrador service dog, wearing a clearly marked vest. Boone was more than a companion. He was Walt's lifeline. Trained to help with balance, pick up dropped items, and soothe the nightmares that still lingered from distant battlefields. Walt walked with a slight limp, a reminder of years spent serving in places most folks only saw in headlines. Dressed in khakis and a Marine Corps cap, he was the picture of quiet dignity. But as he approached the front doors of the clinic, a rookie police officer, Officer Jeremy Collins, stepped outside after wrapping up a separate call. The moment he laid eyes on Boone, his fear took over. The dog let out a soft, alert bark, not out of aggression, but instinct. The officer panicked. "Step away from the dog! Hands up!" he yelled, drawing his taser. Walt raised a calming hand. "Easy, son. He's a trained service dog. I've got his ID right here." He reached slowly into his pocket. That's when the officer fired. Walt hit the pavement hard. Boone barked, confused and distressed, but made no aggressive move, just stood protectively over his fallen handler. Shocked bystanders began filming, and a few shouted for the officer to stop. But the damage was done. Flat on the ground, muscles still spasming from the 50,000 volts, Walt knew who to call. Not 911, not a lawyer. He reached for a special contact saved in his phone. "Bravo Actual," the emergency line for his old Marine Recon unit. 5 minutes later, the silence shattered. The deep, unmistakable rumble of tactical military vehicles rolled down Oak Avenue. From both ends of the street, a convoy of desert-camouflaged Humvees and a light armored vehicle appeared, flanking the area with swift, precise force. Marines in full utility uniforms took up positions like it was Baghdad, not suburbia. Out of the lead vehicle stepped Colonel Raymond Harper, commanding officer and Walt's former superior in Iraq. His face was calm, but his voice was ice. "I'm told one of my men was assaulted," he said flatly, walking straight to Officer Collins. "A retired Marine, with a registered service dog, tased on the sidewalk. You're going to explain that to me and to the police chief who's en route right now." The officer was speechless. His hands shook. Colonel Harper didn't wait for a reply. 2 Marine medics lifted Walt carefully onto a stretcher. Boone trotted faithfully behind, riding with him in a military ambulance that had quietly joined the convoy. The city's police chief arrived minutes later and relieved Collins of duty on the spot. An internal investigation was launched. ADA training was revamped, and every officer in the department now carries a pocket guide on veteran and service animal protocol, because of Walt. And as for the man himself? Walt made a full recovery. He never asked for attention. But when it came, the nation was reminded. You don't turn your back on a veteran, and you never, ever underestimate the loyalty of the Corps. When silence fails, brotherhood answers. The story of Walt and Boone. Walt Briggs never sought recognition. A retired gunnery sergeant with over 30 years of service in the United States Marine Corps, he carried his legacy not on his sleeve, but in his steady gait and calm demeanor. His service took him from the jungles of Vietnam to the deserts of Iraq, and in all that time, he learned that real strength speaks quietly. And sometimes, not at all. These days, Walt's most faithful companion was Boone, a black Labrador service dog trained by the VA to assist with mobility and PTSD support. Boone was more than a helper. He was a partner, always alert to Walt's shifting balance or the silent pull of past memories. Outfitted in a clearly marked vest, Boone had walked thousands of miles beside Walt, including their daily strolls through the quiet neighborhood where folks nodded hello, and no one asked questions. That Thursday afternoon started like any other. Walt, dressed in khaki trousers, a comfortable polo shirt, and a worn Marine Corps cap, was heading to his physical therapy appointment at a small commercial building on Oak Avenue. The day was bright, peaceful. Boone trotted beside him, his tail swaying gently with each step. As they approached the building, a young police officer, Jeremy Collins, stepped out of the glass doors. Collins had just finished responding to a minor call inside, a noise complaint or something equally trivial, and was headed back to his cruiser. The encounter should have been routine. Boone gave a soft bark, alerting Walt to the officer's sudden appearance. It wasn't a threat, just a trained response. But for Officer Collins, the moment ignited fear. A childhood trauma involving a large dog had left him jittery around canines, and Boone's size didn't help. "Step away from the animal," Collins shouted, his voice rising with panic. He reached for his taser. Walt held up a hand. "Officer, please. He's a registered service dog. I've got his ID." But Collins wasn't listening. In a split-second decision fueled by fear, he fired. The barbs hit Walt square in the chest. The old Marine collapsed hard onto the concrete, his hip screaming in pain. Boone immediately barked, alarmed but not aggressive, and stood protectively over Walt, whimpering and nudging his handler's face. People inside the building rushed to the windows. A couple of bystanders started filming with their phones. The officer stood frozen, taser still pointed, his breath short and panicked. Even through the pain, Walt's instincts kicked in. With shaking hands, he reached for his phone. Not to call 911, not to scream for help, but to activate a number saved for only the worst moments. "Bravo Actual." It was the emergency line for his old Marine Recon unit. He pressed call. The voice on the other end was immediate and calm. "Location and sitrep, Gunny." "Oak and 7th, tasered. PD rookie spooked by Boone," Walt gasped. "Hip's bad. Valor's okay." "Understood. Hold tight. Help inbound. ETA under 5. We're coming in hot." And they did. Just 4 minutes later, the distant roar began. Not sirens, but the unmistakable thunder of Marine Corps vehicles. A full convoy of tactical Humvees and a light armored vehicle surged onto Oak Avenue, forming a perimeter around the block in under 60 seconds. Marines in full uniform poured out, disciplined and focused. Leading them was Colonel Raymond Harper, Walt's former CO. He didn't speak right away. He didn't need to. His presence alone froze the scene. "I understand you tased one of my men," he said coldly to Officer Collins. "A retired Marine, with a registered service dog. Care to explain yourself?" Collins stammered. "Sir, the dog, it barked. He reached for something." "That dog," the colonel cut in, pointing to Boone, "has more commendations for service than you have months on this job. And the man you assaulted? He's the reason you wear that badge today." 2 Marine medics were already lifting Walt gently onto a stretcher. Boone followed closely, tail low but eyes alert. A military ambulance had arrived, summoned by the same network that never forgot its own. The fallout was swift. Collins was immediately relieved of duty by the police chief, who arrived pale and breathless minutes later. An investigation followed, and new protocols were implemented. Mandatory ADA training, veteran sensitivity programs, and reforms led by Colonel Harper's office alongside local veterans groups. Walt recovered after a few weeks of rest and rehab. Boone never left his side. In the weeks that followed, neighbors stopped Walt to shake his hand. Veterans wrote letters. Donations poured in to support service animal training programs. And Collins? At Walt's quiet request, he wasn't fired, but reassigned to community outreach, learning firsthand what true service looks like. Because when you disrespect one Marine, you risk hearing the rumble of boots that still answer to honor. And for Walt Briggs, respect wasn't demanded. It was earned and fiercely protected. As the last of the Humvees came to a halt, their engines idling like beasts at rest, the crowd around Oak and 7th fell silent. The shift in atmosphere was immediate. Where panic had reigned just minutes earlier, order now took its place. Marines in full combat utility uniforms moved with disciplined precision, cordoning off the area without raising their voices. There were no weapons drawn, no threats, just presence. Calm, unwavering, and undeniable. Colonel Raymond Harper stepped out of the lead vehicle, his decorated uniform crisp, his posture straight as ever. At 63, he still carried the weight of leadership in his bearing, and when he walked, the street seemed to make room for him. He locked eyes with Officer Collins, who stood rigid, taser still dangling uselessly at his side. "You deployed a taser on a retired Marine gunnery sergeant," Harper said evenly, his voice low, but cutting through the silence like a knife. He was attempting to explain his service dog's status. "You escalated. You ignored protocol. And now you're going to explain it to me and the chief." Collins stuttered, eyes darting to the approaching police cruiser where the city's police chief had just arrived, face pale and tight with worry. "Sir, I thought the dog—" He barked, and the man reached for an ID, for his registered service animal, Harper replied. "That dog," he gestured toward Boone, who stood protectively beside Walt's stretcher, "is recognized across multiple VA facilities. You failed to listen. You failed to de-escalate. And worse, you tased a disabled veteran trying to walk into a physical therapy appointment." 2 Marine medics gently lifted Walt into the back of the military ambulance. Boone followed, tail lowered, but loyalty burning bright in his eyes. Harper leaned in to check on Walt, his tone softening for just a moment. "Rest easy, Gunny. We've got it from here." Back on the street, Harper turned to the police chief, who had just reached them. "Your officer is relieved of duty pending investigation. This matter isn't going away quietly. The Corps doesn't forget its own." The police chief nodded grimly. Collins was escorted to the back of a squad car, not as a criminal, but as a man who had crossed a line he didn't even know existed. Because when the chain of command activates, there are no misunderstandings, only accountability. And for Marines like Walt Briggs, that chain still holds. In the days that followed the incident at Oak and 7th, Walt Briggs recovered quietly at the military hospital, surrounded by more support than he ever expected. His hip was sore, his pride bruised, but his spirit remained untouched. Boone, ever faithful, stayed at his side through every step, his chin resting on Walt's knee during checkups, his tail thumping softly with every visitor who came to pay respects. The city, however, was far from quiet. The video of the tasering, shared by bystanders, went viral within hours. Americans across the country watched in disbelief as a decorated veteran in his 70s was dropped to the pavement simply for trying to explain that his dog was there to help him stand. Veterans groups, disability advocates, and ordinary citizens alike voiced their outrage. Comment sections lit up with one word again and again: respect. Colonel Harper didn't wait for headlines. He pushed for immediate accountability. Officer Collins was suspended pending a full internal affairs and DOJ investigation. More importantly, Harper collaborated with local and state officials to implement a complete overhaul of how officers are trained to recognize and interact with veterans and disabled individuals. These weren't just lectures. These were immersive training sessions led by real veterans, by people who had walked in boots that left deep impressions on foreign soil. The reforms were sweeping. Mandatory ADA and veteran interaction training for all officers, service dog protocol embedded into academy curriculum, and a newly established liaison role between local departments and veterans groups. Walt's story became the centerpiece of these trainings, not to shame, but to teach. His experience, though painful, became a living blueprint for how not to treat those who served. Meanwhile, Walt remained humble. When asked by a reporter what he wanted most out of this, he simply said, "I just want folks to learn from it. Not for me, but for the next guy, the next vet out there trying to make it through the day." Respect isn't earned by shouting. It's earned in silence, in sacrifice, and in standing tall even after you've been knocked down. Walt Briggs didn't ask for attention. He asked for understanding. And through the loyalty of Boone, the strength of brotherhood, and the power of accountability, he reminded us that honor doesn't fade with age. If this story touched your heart, drop a comment below with the word respect, and share a story of someone who quietly changed your life. Subscribe to our channel for more powerful, real-life stories that restore your faith in courage, community, and the strength of quiet heroes like Walt and Boone.